Hey, what's up guys, it's Matt with the Movement System. In this video, we're gonna talk about why gym fatigue occurs and what you can do about it. After working with hundreds of clients over the last 10 years, I've noticed a pattern. Some people are able to stay motivated and make progress from month to month consistently for years. Others, for some reason, end up getting to a point where it seems like the more that they add to their workout, the less progress they make. This can be really confusing because especially as a beginner, you learn that the more work that you put in, the more progress that you make. So in this video, we're gonna try to identify where the problem is and why some people, when they push harder and harder, seem to make less progress. Let's go ahead and dive into it. Okay, so it's important to lay the groundwork here. Humans are very adaptable. You can adapt to a very wide degree of training volumes. For example, there have been times where I've been training 2 or 3 hours a week and felt tired from it. And there have been other times leading up to an Ironman race, for example, where I'm training 20 hours a week and not feeling tired at all. So why does that happen? Well, our body is constantly adapting and detraining from whatever training stimulus you give it. For example, if you're running progressively more and more each week, you would expect aerobic adaptations like your ability to run go up and up and up each week. If at the same time you're decreasing the amount of time that you're putting in the gym, you would expect some amount of muscle atrophy over that period of time. Long story short, your body adapts to whatever training stimulus you give it. Now here's where it gets important because it starts to relate to training fatigue that you might be experiencing. Your body adapts differently to general stress and specific stress. Here's what I mean by that. If, for example, I've been running 5 hours a week and lifting 1 hour per week, in that case, I have specifically prepared for 5 hours of running and 1 hour of resistance training. If next week I do 5 hours of running and 1 hour of resistance training, there's not a lot of general stress on my body. In fact, that's almost all specific stress because it's the same stimulus that I've been giving my body over the last few weeks. By contrast, if I did 5 hours of resistance training and 1 hour of running, it's the same volume of work, but that's a lot of general stress because it's 4 more hours of resistance training than I've been used to. So with that same 6-hour training week, one week to the next, I'm gonna experience a lot more fatigue from the second option. So a question to ask yourself is how much of the stress of your training has been general stress versus specific stress? This is a really important principle to know because if you're adding something brand new, it's more likely to cause a lot of general stress and a lot of general stress response to your body. Whereas if you're adding something that's very similar to what you've been doing, but just to a slightly higher dose, that's how, for example, endurance athletes can build up to training 15 or 20 hours a week without experiencing a ton of fatigue. Similarly, bodybuilders can work up to being able to handle a lot of volume of resistance training over time by adding a little bit of general stress each week and making sure that they're managing it well. But what if that hasn't been the case for you and you haven't been able to build up over time and it seems like the more you add, the more fatigue you have? Even if it's doing the same thing each week, you're just more and more fatigued. In that case, something went wrong and we need to problem solve. There are 2 reasons that this could be occurring. Let's walk through both. The first reason, and I think this one is the most common, is the volume trap. This is a cycle where people will often get caught adding more and more volume with less and less intensity of training. This is specifically relevant to people who are lifting weights kinda hard very frequently. Here's what that looks like. Often individuals are going into the gym and they're kind of tired from their training and from their life stress. So they just decide they're going to keep going to the gym frequently, but they just decide they're going to do more reps and less weight. So even though you can squat 315 for 5 reps, instead you're just going to do 225 and you're going to do a bunch of sets of 10. Then a few days later, all of that volume of training from light weight caused a lot of fatigue, but didn't cause very much training adaptation. There is a disproportionate response, high fatigue, low training response. What does this lead people to do? It leads people to feel tired and fatigued, so they keep going to the gym, keep doing even less weight or about that same amount of weight, more reps, because they think they just need to keep doing more and more to make progress, and the cycle continues. I've seen this dozens of times, and it really is the junk volume trap. Your body doesn't respond well to sets that are far from failure, submaximal. Even if that training feels hard and you're tired and you're sore, it doesn't necessarily mean you're getting better. That's why it's really important to track something like your 5 rep max month to month and make sure that you're actually making progress on something that is measurable. Anytime I have clients that I'm working with on my programs who are tracking 5 rep max and we're not seeing a jump from week to week, if they're adding more volume and they're not seeing improvement, that's a good indication that we need to dial the training volume back and potentially increase intensity. So for problem 1, the volume trap, the solution is to decrease the training volume that's causing all that fatigue and then put a little bit of meaningful volume in with enough intensity that we're actually going to improve the rate of progress and strength gains. Oftentimes I'll introduce a block of training with something like 6 sets of 2, 5 sets of 3, something where we're not doing that many reps, but we can actually push hard. It's a different stimulus than the high volume trap that you got caught in, and it can really help you make progress and turn things around. It's also important to mention here that under recovering is typically usually not the case for these individuals. Often the thought process is, I have all this fatigue, I'm doing a lot of volume of training, so I need to add an ice bath, or I need to add the sauna, or I need to add a massage gun to solve this problem. But more often than not, that doesn't improve outcomes. Nothing wrong with it if you want to add that, but we also need to address the root cause, which is a lot of junk volume. Okay, so the second reason for stalled progress in the gym and more fatigue is true overreaching or overtraining. This is less common and it typically takes a very high volume of training done for a long period of time to get to this point. That said, I've had clients who have gotten to this point and really needed to dial back and focus on other things. Importantly, there are levels to this. If you've just been feeling fatigued for a few days to weeks, you may actually be functionally overreaching. That is kind of level 1 here. This is a typical part of hard training, especially if you're working up to a big event. You're going to be pushing to the point where you might see a temporary decrease in performance, a little bit more fatigue, but that could be because you're planning a deload, you're planning to take some of that training volume away and continue to make progress. Functional overreaching is something to notice, but it's not necessarily a big problem. In a state of functional overreaching, we'll often see less motor recruitment and fast twitch muscle fibers, so your jump height, for example, might go down, but it's not that big of a deal because you know you're going to decrease your training stress with a deload and you're going to be able to continue progress over time. Okay, but if that stagnation or decrease in performance lasts for weeks to months, that could be getting into a state of non-functional overreaching. This is where it really becomes more of a problem and we need to make some more big changes. Indications of a state of non-functional overreaching could be things like increased resting heart rate, stagnations in performance, mood disturbances, higher blood pressure and stress levels. These are all indications that you could be in a state of non-functional overreaching. A lot of athletes in this state think that they need to push harder and break through a plateau, so they'll add an extra run, add an extra lift, add more intensity. If these additions to your training are not making the expected increase in performance, it could be an indication that you're not in an appropriate training state to be adding more training stress. You might not be handling the training stress you are already experiencing very well. It's important that in this state we dial back and focus on sleep and recovery so that way you don't push all the way to true overtraining syndrome. Overtraining syndrome is characterized by months to years of decreased performance, sleep disturbances, sickness, infection, and chronic low energy levels. It's a good idea for athletes who get to this point to work with a medical professional or a training professional to try to get back on the right track and get healthy again. If you or an athlete that you're working with has gotten to a true state of overtraining, it's really important to prioritize physical health, mental health before worrying about performance variables. Okay, here are 2 key takeaways. Number 1, make sure that you're measuring your progress long term. This can help you identify when adding more training isn't causing the expected response. This is a good indication that something needs to change. We want to get ahead of this early and make sure we're introducing the right training stress to cause the right response for you. And then number 2, and this one's very important, don't compare yourself to others. The right training stimulus for you is probably within 10% of whatever you did last week. Even if someone else is in a very competitive season and has low life stress and is doing great, you may or may not be able to get anywhere close to their training load. Consider what you did last week, what your long-term goals are, and make a small change, 5 or 10%, to put you on track for that. If you've been experiencing fatigue in the gym and burnout, I really hope this helps you identify some of the problems and get in the right mindset to make changes and make progress again. One thing that can really help with being consistent with training and building up over time is having a training program to follow. If you're looking for a training program to follow so that way you can go to the gym, open up an app and see exactly what you need to do when you get to the gym, as well as track your progress from week to week and month to month to make sure you're making progress, you can check out some of the movement system programs, which I'll link in the description below. We have a vertical jump program to improve your vertical jump and athleticism, as well as a strength and hypertrophy program to build your strength and hypertrophy. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you smash the like button and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks.